Just waiting for the official go-ahead. Won't be a minute, hopefully. Good. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to the Apple Maps session. This was originally planned as it is a 30-minute session. We've had to move it because of one of the presenters for this original session got COVID, so we've got plenty of time, about half an hour for questions. I'll try and stretch it out a bit, but yeah, it's 30 minutes of content that we're going to get through today. My name's Andrew Duncan. I'm the owner of DataBuzz. We're a Claris partner based down in Sydney, Australia. I'm not going to tell the same jokes I told yesterday, so we'll skip through some of those. I've been developing in FileMaker for about 30 years, and I'm a FileMaker certified developer. I've spoken at DevCons in the US and APAC where I'm based, and I've had a long-standing interest in integration, and that's the thing that's sort of kept me engaged with the FileMaker platform sort of probably for the last sort of 15 years. And I've always enjoyed doing mapping integrations, which I've been doing for probably 10, 15 years now. DataBuzz is a Claris partner, Shopify partner, Xero partner, and a DocuSign partner, amongst other partnerships. Like many of you, I've been collecting my Claris badges over the last few months, and got the full set now. And just finally on DataBuzz, we've got a number of integration solutions that we sell for customers and developers that help you fast-track integrations with platforms like QuickBooks and Xero in the cloud accounting space, Shopify and WooCommerce in the e-commerce space, DocuSign for e-signature, and we have solutions for sending and receiving SMS, MMS, and WhatsApp messages from the FileMaker platform. So happy to talk about those in the breaks if you want to come and grab me. So before we get going, I want to just sort of pose the question, why would you want to map in FileMaker? What's the point, essentially? Well, there's a number of reasons why we map. We like to visualize addresses, see where our address is in relation to other points of interest, and work out the best way to get there. How do we get from point A to point B? What's the best way to get from point A to point B when we've got many choices? And we might want to calculate driving distances, for example, for billing purposes. And the point of all this is, well, the data for all of that might be in your FileMaker solution or your client's FileMaker solution. And isn't it great to be able to map all those things and calculate all of those things without having to leave FileMaker? We don't want to be copying and pasting addresses into Apple Maps or the Google Maps website. If we can just click a button and do it in FileMaker, then we've got a much more sort of efficient solution. I just want to talk about one of my customers just briefly. It's called Wildlife Rescue Australia, and they're a non-profit, and they run a national call centre for injured animals in Australia. And I've helped their owner build a sort of a mapping integration, and it sort of works like this, where the phone coordinator receives a call, and in the top left they record the address of the injured animal and what type of animal it is, and then they select what service providers they might need. It might be a vet or a carer or a rescuer and so on. And then they click a button and they draw a map, and you can see there's a number of sort of colour-coded markers, and they represent different types of service providers, so vets in yellow and rescuers in green and so on. And they can click on one and get more details about that provider, and they can then click on the name and view the website, or click on the number to dial their number straight from there. So they can do all this without leaving FileMaker. So I think hopefully that'll give you an idea of, or at least one example of sort of the benefits of mapping within FileMaker. So what are we going to cover today? Obviously we'll talk about MapKit JS. That's what this is all about ultimately. We'll do a bit of a comparison between that and the Google Maps API that's been around. Anybody been doing mapping with Google Maps over the last... Okay, so quite a lot of you. That's great. We'll go through the basics of requesting MapKit JS access, and then we'll do some demos, how to create a simple map of an address that's in your FileMaker using the web viewer, how to plot multiple markers on a map, and then talk about some of the options for customising the appearance of the map. So a quick word of warning, the JS in MapKit JS obviously stands for JavaScript. It's the same language you'd be using for Google Maps. So you're going to get your hands dirty with HTML, CSS and JavaScript at the end of the day. And I'm by no means an expert JavaScript developer. Most of the time I just find an example that I need and look at the source code and work backwards from that. I'm probably making lots of errors. If a seasoned JavaScript developer looked at my code, they'd probably take me out the back and shoot me, I suspect. But if I can get it working, then I'm happy and my customers are happy. And there's JavaScript's, I think, the #1 programming language in terms of popularity at the moment. So thousands of resources like Stack Overflow and so on, and even ChatGPT can write JavaScript for you these days as well. Okay, so a quick bit of, just want to go down a bit of a memory road down the history of Apple Maps. It was first launched in 2012 with iOS 6, and many of you might remember it didn't get off to a great start. It was pretty terrible. 10 years later, much has improved, and it's now the default map on iOS, macOS, watchOS, and FileMaker app, and lots of other apps use Apple Maps by default now. Some of you, anybody remember seeing images like this when using the first version of Apple Maps, where roads would just sort of sink into the ground and freeways looked like they'd been hit by an earthquake, but they hadn't, or roads would just sort of appear in the sea as well. So obviously they weren't the days to be using Apple Maps, but thankfully those days are behind us. Before we jump into MapKit JS, I just want to mention a sort of a basic low-code option that doesn't really require much programming, and that's using the Maps link URL scheme. We're all probably familiar with FMP URLs and using them on the iOS app SDK and so on. So Apple Maps has its own version of that, and it's a way to show locations and generate directions in Apple Maps just by passing in some parameters. It's macOS, iOS only. If you give me the directions between those 2 points. Now, MapKit JS. So MapKit JS is what we're going to be getting our hands dirty with today, and it's Apple Maps for the web. It was first released at Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference in 2018 as a beta. It's now up to version 5. It's pretty stable these days, and its purpose was to let you embed maps directly into your websites, just like the Apple Maps API does for apps on iPhones and iPads. And if we can embed a map into a website, then we can also embed a map into a FileMaker web viewer. It lets you add annotations and overlays to the map and call out points of interest and so on. And you get a free daily limit of 250,000 map views and 25,000 service calls, which we'll go into shortly, per Apple Developer Program membership. And yes, you do need to be a member. You do need a membership of the Apple Developer Program, which starts at $99 US, or the equivalent in your local currency. In terms of browser support, it supports all the current popular shipping versions of the big browsers these days. And we know that the web viewer in FileMaker 20 at least supports the WebKit engine on macOS, which Safari uses, and the Edge engine on Windows, which Microsoft Edge uses. So by extension, we can then embed these maps into a web viewer, just like we can with Google Maps. So why would you use MapKit JS? Google Maps has been around for a long, long time. Well, I've got many customers who are Mac only, iOS only, and they generally prefer to use or see things in Apple Maps. It's familiar, they use the Apple Maps every day, so it might be good to switch over to Apple Maps. As I mentioned, it's sort of caught up with Google Maps at a high level for general functionality. You might want to give your users a choice. Some users might prefer Apple Maps, some might prefer Google Maps. We could give our users a choice, obviously more work, but it's about pleasing our customers at the end of the day. And you might have a personal preference. I've talked to developers who hate Google Maps but love Apple Maps and vice versa. So just a quick word on geocodes. So geocodes are fundamental to mapping with Google or Apple. And geocoding is the process of converting an address into a latitude and longitude coordinate pair, for those who are not familiar with it. And it's required generally to map addresses, particularly multiple markers. You don't feed in addresses, you feed in geocodes for most of these APIs. With MapKit, Apple's got an API to convert an address in your FileMaker solution into a geocode, and that's called a service call. And you might remember we get 25,000 of those a day, so you can geocode 25,000 addresses a day. You store these in your FileMaker contact record. unless the address changes, the geocode won't need to be updated. So, getting started. So you need to be a member of the Apple Developer Program, as I mentioned, and inside that you create what they call a Maps ID. Excuse me, you use your Developer Program Team ID, and then you create a Maps private key, and that's very similar to creating a certificate signing request for a FileMaker SSL certificate. And then you generate a JWT, so lots of jargon and tokens here. So JWT is just a JSON web token, and that's what you use to authenticate with the Apple Maps service. And that has an expiry date. All JWTs generally have an expiry date. If you use the Apple Maps website to create one of these, you can extend it out to 12 months. I've got a demo file that I'll share with you after the conference that you can create the JWT and you can choose your own expiry date. But just make a note of that, because once it expires, you've got to generate a new one and it'll get rejected by Apple. And when you're geocoding, you need to generate an access token, which my demo file will show you how to do. But yeah, you use the JWT to generate an access token. That's good for 30 minutes, and you can geocode and keep generating a new access token. All the details for creating all these IDs and private keys and so on is on the Apple Developer website at that URL. Now, I just want to sort of work backwards a bit and hopefully not scare you off too much. So here's an example from the Apple Developer website for a simple Maps web page, and or embedding, and it's 40 lines of code with a couple of blank lines in there. So it's pretty basic. And if you can see in there, like at line 33, there's a MapKit coordinate, and it's got a geocode. So the idea here is we just want to substitute that with our geocode from our FileMaker database and feed that into a web view, and then we've got a Apple Maps of an address. So it's pretty basic at the end of the day. That's obviously a simple example. Just a quick overview of comparing MapKit with the Google Maps API. They both use JavaScript for the programming language. They both have geocoding APIs. They differ around sort of billing and map views. So you obviously need an Apple Developer Program membership, which you've got to pay up front. And that gives you 250,000 map views a day and 25,000 geocodes a day. Google, you need to create a billing account and have a credit card on file, but they have like a free tier, which gives you a certain amount of map loads per month. And most of my customers use Google, never exceed that free tier, so they've never had to pay for maps. Obviously, if you're doing thousands and thousands of maps, you might incur a toll. Resources, they're all on the Apple Developer website. It's got all the technical documentation about MapKit JS, and that's where I went and grabbed some examples. Beeswax did a blog a number of years ago when MapKit came out about getting started with Apple Maps, which had a demo file as well. So that's it for the sort of theory. Now I want to go through some examples. And here's, if you need to contact me after the conference, you can do it through Twitter, Facebook, or our website. So let's get out of that. I'll just switch over. Yes, great. Okay, so here's the demo file. I need to remove some stuff before I can share it, but it'll be on the Google Drive shortly. And I've populated my Apple Team ID, my Apple Maps ID, and my private key that I generated on the Apple Developer website. And now I need to create my JSON web token. So I can just run a FileMaker script that generates that. I've hard-coded it to a 10-year expiry date. And now I've got my JWT, and that's what I need to start mapping and create an access token for service calls. Just wanted to sort of work backwards a bit too and show you some examples in a bit more detail. So yeah, here's the sample. If I sort of zoom in a bit, I can basically just take that and substitute out. If I can get a geocode in FileMaker and push that into this blob of text and feed that into the web viewer as the source for the web viewer, that's how I'm going to start. That's how I'm going to be doing my mapping today. So back to FileMaker. Just zoom out a bit. So let's go through some demos. So I wanted to show you the Apple Maps app one first. So if I choose an address, say the conference centre where we are, I've got the address in my address fields. I'll click the Open in Apple Maps and that takes me to that point on the Apple Maps app and puts a little marker there. I can also centre that. If I wanted to centre that on the Apple Maps app without a marker, I can do that as well. I'm not sure why you do that, but so that's a pretty easy way to do that. If we just go to another record, let me look at my list. Sorry, oops. So we choose, say, the Empire State Building in New York. I'll just walk you through what's happening here because it's pretty basic. So I'm just grabbing my address and putting a comma-separated version of that together. I'm then using the get URLs encoded function to URL encode it. We also got to URL encode this stuff. And then the format for the URL is slightly different on iOS versus macOS. So I'm creating my maps URL, and then I'm just using the open URL script step to open that, and the operating system will then redirect that to the Maps app on either platform. So pretty standard stuff. So I get a URL, and then I'm just opening it, and it'll take me to that URL. Obviously, I can't do things like I can't control the zoom and some of the other features like the marker and that sort of stuff, but I can always use the zoom functions in the Maps app to zoom in and out. So that's sort of the low-code basic function. Don't need to do any programming. You just create a variable and use the open URL script step, and you're away. Obviously, we want to generally go a bit further than that and have a bit more control and customise the appearance of our maps and keep it in FileMaker. We're leaving FileMaker in the Apple Maps app, so let's stay in FileMaker. So while we're here, we'll just go through the geocoding. So I've got my fields for my latitude and longitude. I can just run a script and that will geocode the address I'm on. And you can see that just returns a nice big blob of JSON, which FileMaker can obviously easily pass with the JSON functions. So I'm just basically going to be targeting the latitude and the longitude, store that in field. Got my geocode, which is a comma-separated combination of those two. And I'm away. 1 second. Oops. Okay, so let's go a bit further now with MapKit. So here I've got a web viewer. If we look at the source for the web view, it's just my web viewer source HTML field in this table, and that field is on this tab. And there's many ways you can set all this up, but I've got another field which is on this tab, which is my placeholder HTML JavaScript code, and you can see that I've got some sort of strings like this where I've positioned where I want the FileMaker data to appear, in this case the JWT, and I've positioned where I want the geocode to appear. And I'm just going to be using a substitute to substitute my FileMaker values for those hardcode values. So that's one way to do it. Many other ways you can do this. FileMaker obviously lets us solve problems in more than one way, but that's how I'm doing it for this demo, just so you know where this is all coming from. So I can choose a contact. So let's choose, let's go for Big Ben. And I'll draw my map. And obviously that's not a great map because I can't see where Big Ben is. It's sort of very zoomed out. So the Google Maps API has got like a zoom control function where you can specify like an integer and tell it how far to zoom in. Apple Maps hasn't got the sort of direct equivalent, but it's got this thing called a coordinate region where you pass in a combination of values for latitude and longitude, and that basically determines, it sort of works the same way as a zoom function. So if I change the coordinate span, now I'm getting a much better view, and I can play with that number and work out what works best for me. But I know that Big Ben is in there, and I could make that number smaller. But there's Big Ben there, I believe. Okay, so that's a pretty simple example. You can also do the center inversion. Oh no, that was that one. Sorry. So that example takes us to Big Ben, but I sort of don't know where. I don't know. I'm assuming that's Big Ben, but because it's in the centre of the map. But wouldn't it be good to sort of now get a marker to pinpoint exactly where our Big Ben is? So let's go to my next demo, which which is the single marker. So I'll do Big Ben again. And so Apple Maps, you're probably familiar, has a balloon. It has like that red balloon by default with a little white pin in the middle. So for the balloon, I'll choose so I'm just going to choose red. So I'm just passing in a sort of human readable name. I can pass in the hex code for a colour as well. So let's draw that on the map. So now I'm getting a red pin, so I know that's exactly where Big Ben is. In Westminster. If we do another one, I might do the Leonardo Hotel, where many of you are staying. That's the hotel in there somewhere. So now I can start to put some options. I can change the title, which is the sort of the text that appears below the balloon. So I can put Engage Hotel. And I'll draw that on a map. So now I can put some text. Sometimes you might want text, sometimes you might not want a title. I'm just going to change this over to the Bondi Beach, which is a beach where I'm from. And I'm going to do a light yellow one. And we'll draw that on the map. Anybody been to Bondi Beach in Australia? Excellent. So here's my map. Not a great choice of colour. So let's give it a title. Bondi Beach. And we'll get that. So that stands out a bit more. Now I want to show you some options for what you can do for the inside of the balloon. So that's called a glyph, and you can actually leave it with the default sort of white pin, or you can actually replace it with some text. So you could actually put just some text itself, or you can insert some Unicode text where you can start getting that sort of emojis essentially. So I've got the emoji for a surfer, which I've put it in. I've said it's Unicode. So now I'm getting a little surfer dude. I can't zoom in on that because if I zoom in, the marker stays the same, but hopefully you can sort of roughly see that that's a little surfer dude. So that's that one. Now, callouts. I showed you my wildlife rescue demo earlier that you can click on a marker and get a callout, a bit like a popover. We can have more information. So let's have a look at that example. Let's do, say, the Sydney Opera House where I'm from. We'll do a black one. We'll call it the Opera House. And we'll draw that on the map. And that's now clickable. So I can click on that and that's showing me information. And that's coming from the FileMaker record. So you can feed in whatever you like. You can make things clickable. You can feed in HTML so they can click an FMP URL that will take them to a particular record, or dial a phone number, or open up a website, all that sort of stuff. So you've got complete control over I think you can pretty much control the font and the format of the text as well from memory. Yeah, so if we just play with some other examples of that. I can switch to the Eiffel Tower in Paris, change the colour, and once again get a call out. So that's fairly simple to do as well. We've done single markers. That's probably some of the use case, but another use case might be multiple markers, like in my wildlife rescue map, where I want to mark rescuers near a certain location. So let's go to that demo. So here I've gone and grabbed, it's all public, I haven't stolen anything, but this is all on the EngageU website where they list all the attendees and the country they're from. So I've gone and grabbed 100 of them and I've eliminated some duplicates. So I can basically go and create a map for all the attendees, and I'll just make this a bit bigger. So I'm just using the default red balloon with a white pin. You can see there's all the, that's the first 100 attendees I grabbed. So lots of affinities in Europe. We know there were 22 countries, I think, and there's little old me down in Australia. So that's pretty good. I can see markers all around the world. If I go back to my list and I can obviously change the colour, so I might go for say we choose brown, and then we can obviously, same map, just a different colour marker, so that's pretty straightforward. But I also work, because we can insert Unicode, we can insert emojis and things, so I thought, well, let's show the flags instead. So if I tick that box, that's going to give me the same map, but showing the flags of the various countries. Obviously doesn't look great in a brown marker, but there you can see the flags of the countries in the markers there, in the balloons. So yeah, that's just one example of mapping markers. So basically you're creating an array in the JSON, and just Apple Maps is ingesting that. Now for my final demo, I just want to go through directions. So you might have a starting address and a destination address. So you might be at Brussels Airport and you want to get to the Leonardo Hotel in Antwerp. Let's map that. So we're basically just passing in two addresses, and obviously we don't want to be walking. Let's change that to driving. We'll map that again, and we'll zoom out and we can get a map for that. Let's do something a bit more small than that. I'm going to go to a train station in Sydney. Got to get my kids to school. That's the map for that, and I can obviously fiddle with the coordinate span to change how sort of zoomed in it is. But yeah, that's giving me one marker for the starting destination and one marker for the ending destination, and showing me the map, and I can toggle between driving and walking there. So we're just on 30 minutes. That was basically my 30-minute limit, which I've just hit. So basically happy to answer any questions at this point, if you've got any questions. Okay, just one sec.
Now?
Yep.
A little much. I'm assuming you get the distance here, but could you get how much of this distance is ferry? I'm trying to calculate, take a car from here to Finland, and you're going to have a ferry from Stockholm to Helsinki.
Yeah, that's a more advanced option. I haven't played with any. I've just played with walking and driving from point A to point B. I can certainly look into that for you, yeah.
The Big Ben example. Mm-hmm. So the pin wasn't exactly on Big Ben.
Mm.
That's like for somebody who's British, that's like terribly important. But is that just down to the geocode that you'd chosen, or as in, had you looked that up from somewhere else and it had given you some geocoordinates that aren't quite right? Because clearly, when you say, "Hey, map this coordinate," it'll put the pin where you say it is. So I just wondered why that.
Yeah, I was wondering if anyone would pick up on that, because here's the Sydney Opera House, and it's got the same issue. Where the pin is, that's the Opera House right there.
Yeah, it's not the Opera
and that's
House.
Where so that's the geocoding services, or Apple's geocoding services, giving us that latitude and longitude for that address. Okay. I did some comparisons with Google Maps, and Google Maps was a bit better at giving me a better geocode for some of these things that didn't quite look right. So yeah,
clearly the issue. I mean, that's like a fun thing, but the issue is if you're actually using it for delivery addresses and things for people, then you do pretty much want it to be accurate. I don't want my parcel going 800 meters down the street to somebody else.
Yeah, and I don't know why. Like if I find, Big Ben, like that's the address I put in. I don't know if I could put in a more accurate address for Big Ben, if there's a street address that I should have used, because it's obviously just got Westminster, so that might not be
Yeah, in the UK, if it's the postcode is like an area, and it'll just give you the pin in the centre of the postcode.
But I don't know if I put in a street address, like 21 whatever street Big Ben's on, if that might give me a more accurate...
Give you a better address.
Because I think it's just mapping geocoding Westminster, which is sort of the Parliament Square.
No, it's just to understand,
Yeah.
accuracy issues.
Yeah, so it's about the address that I've...
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I've chosen sort of tourist sort of markers that people recognise, but yeah, if I did my house, it would obviously it would give me a pin right on my house. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Any other questions? No. Okay, I think we're done. Thanks everyone. Thanks for coming along.